I'm Afshin Rattansi, and you're watching Going Underground. Coming up in the show, the turn of the Horn of Africa amidst an Ethiopian state of emergency. We talk to neighboring Eritrea's UN Ambassador Sophia Tesfamarian about the Biden administration's destabilizing military, economic and propaganda influence on peace after NATO defeat in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya and Syria. And after that suspicious Lebanese port explosion, how long can Hezbollah's Sheikh Nasrallah wait as NATO, Israel and Saudi Arabia attacks a jewel of the Mediterranean and linchpin of the Middle East? We ask Lebanon's former Foreign Minister Fariz Bouez. All this and more coming up in today's Going Underground. But first, many saw the defeat and pullout of UK-US troops from Afghanistan as a precursor to more intervention in Africa. Right on cue, we now have chaos in the Horn of Africa, with Ethiopia declaring a state of emergency with millions perhaps facing starvation. This follows not only non-NATO investment in Ethiopia, but peace between Ethiopia and NATO enemy Eritrea. Joining me now is Eritrea's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Sophia Tesfamarian. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for coming on the program. I don't know whether you see British television, but in NATO nation countries, your country is called a dictatorship, deliberately conscripting people, continuous human rights abuses. And as you know, as Ethiopia declares its state of emergency, the UN report said big numbers of violations committed by Eritrean government forces. What do you think about how Eritrea is being treated here in NATO nation media as regards the conflict?
Ashton, I think you and I have been through this for the last 20 years. There has never been mainstream media or any of the NATO allies that have shown the truth about what's going on in Eritrea, on the ground, or in Ethiopia. So it comes as no surprise to us that this continued attack on Eritrea, the fabrication of allegations, the media takes over and fabricates in multiple dimensions. And even here at the UN, they're inundated with the reports, and I call it the echo chamber reports. So these are not reports coming from independent investigators. These are people that they hire to write about Eritrea and other countries that are off target, and they always miss the target. They've missed the point. They've missed and misjudged and misrepresented.
You know those corporate news organizations always say that's because Eritrea or Ethiopia won't let them in. And are you seriously saying that the Biden administration would, in effect, aid what the UN itself now says may be a step away, 2 million people being starving to death? Remind us what this is. The TPLF, we invite its leader, Debretsion Gebremichael, on. You say they are backed by NATO nation weaponry to destabilize the Horn of Africa?
Well, they've done that for the last 27 years. So it comes as no surprise to hear about satellites being provided to them and satellite information being provided and mercenaries fighting with them on the ground. It would be not a surprise for me, for a kleptocratic clique that stole $30 billion from the Ethiopian coffers. I think they can afford mercenaries from all over the world, and no doubt they will bring them to fight their cause. And are they being supported by the West? Well, at least they're getting diplomatic and political shield and support. We have not heard in the last 11 months any condemnation of what the TPLF is doing on the ground. Why is a rebel group, a terrorist group for that matter, that's registered as a terrorist group, allowed to rampage throughout a country and threaten to destabilize the country, destroy infrastructure, kill people, maim, and continue with the genocidal tendencies that it started while it was in power? And, they committed genocides in Gambela, in Oromo, in Ogaden. These are documented genocides by the TPLF regime. I didn't hear any outcry from the NATO allies today that are crying about genocide in Tigray. That didn't happen. There is no genocide in Tigray.
Well, NATO countries, let alone the TPLF, deny all charges of genocide. And I have to ask you, wasn't it NATO countries that supported peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia? I mean, the Nobel Prize given to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. I mean, did that peace, remind us, that peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea, they still sanctioned your country, the West, did they, while that peace was made?
The peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia came because of the will and the power of the Ethiopian and Eritrean people first. Had nothing to do with the Western allies. The peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia came because the Ethiopian people fought and removed the TPLF regime in 2018. And at that time, when Prime Minister Abiy took over in Ethiopia, he accepted the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission decision and agreed to implement the decision. And that's how peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia came, because that was our only problem. Not Ethiopia not accepting the Algiers Agreement that was final and binding, and he did. And that's how peace came. The Europeans, the Americans, the UN, none of them had anything to do with it. So don't give them credit for something they did not do.
Well, what do you think of Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. diplomat, and what do you think of the Biden administration and how different it is? Because that great hero of the Global South, Mike Pompeo, despised all around the Global South, it has to be said, let alone by maybe the Biden administration, did condemn TPLF missile strikes on Eritrea. You're a big fan of Donald Trump. Is that the problem?
No. I don't think it has anything to do with being a fan of Donald Trump or not. The Biden administration is probably responding to the onslaught of propaganda and letters and cries and whines that have been sent through Congress. I know how the TPLF works when it maneuvers and sends out these 10 million letters to Congress crying, we're going to be annihilated, we're going to be killed. And the American congressmen and legislators are feeling like they need to respond to this onslaught of letters and pleas and phone calls and faxes. And I think Biden is being fooled also by people in his administration. We don't have friends in the Biden administration. The Horn of Africa is suffering from a racist, incoherent policy for the Horn of Africa, and it's affecting the whole region. The whole foreign policy structure for the Horn of Africa needs to be reevaluated. And it goes beyond personalities and it goes beyond individuals within the administration. But the whole system needs to sit down and really recalibrate and think out loud what it is that they're losing in the Horn of Africa, which they are. And this situation in Ethiopia will settle. Maybe not next week, maybe not the week after, but it'll settle. And the Ethiopian people will get what they want, which is total control of their country and the ouster of TPLF from their villages and stop the killing and the maiming.
You see, some might say that's a bit optimistic, given the Bab el-Mandeb Straits are so crucial to not only the military, but also big corporations. I think maybe most of our studio must have at one point been on a ship going through those straits. Who knows? You've seen what NATO policy has done to Iraq, to Syria, to Libya. Why do you believe that the power of NATO nations and the media, allied to the media, cannot again launch a humanitarian intervention in the Horn of Africa that unseats your President Afwerki, let alone Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia?
Number one, it's not something that they haven't tried for 20 years. And I would say the credit goes to the people of Ethiopia and Eritrea and the Horn of Africa, who are much more conscious about what's going on in their countries than they were before, and much more conscious of strategic and foreign policies of many countries than they were before. And this heightened consciousness amongst the peoples in the region will not allow this kind of intervention in our region. And I don't think that Africa and the African Union, nor any of our friends and allies outside of Africa, are willing to see another African country destroyed. Eritrea and Ethiopia are not the only ones that are suffering from wrong policies, but we've seen the Africanization of terrorism all through Mali and Guinea and all and these regime changes. Used to be the what they're calling it, the Arab Spring was the code before. Now it's these terrorists and rebels that are supposed to be threatening governments, suddenly becoming the governments. And I think that does not bode well for U.S. in Africa. The credibility and integrity of U.S. institutions are being questioned today. As an honest broker, I don't know that the U.S. or the EU would be honest brokers in Ethiopia today. So a lot of dynamics are going on, but the people are withstanding the pressure. The people are at the point where they can withstand the pressure. It's a unified country. In Eritrea, they have almost no chance at all of convincing us that what they're doing is for our own good. I think we've learned a lesson for 20 years. And I think Ethiopians are learning that lesson today.
Well, there have been 5 reputed Western-backed coups: Sudan, Mali, Chad, Guinea, Niger, just this year. And the face of Eritrea in, say, Britain is that of a refugee across the English Channel fleeing your government and in love with the liberalism and freedom that Britain gives them. That's what NATO nation media say.
Well, that's the media portrayal, but nobody talks about how they're luring the youth to try and depopulate Eritrea and prevent it from being a country where its youth could live and work in. You know, they started with these academic reports and academic papers that said you cannot dream in Eritrea, dreams don't come true in Eritrea, almost, you know, making the youth feel like there is no hope in their country. And yes, we have economic migrants like anybody else, but to make it look like they're fleeing the government or fleeing because there's something they're afraid of in Eritrea was exaggerated. And today, those fleeing youth are here in the United States and in the UK, in their communities, working with their brothers and sisters in the community, supporting families in Eritrea, supporting their people. So if they went, they didn't go too far. They're back in the fold.
Just very briefly, because it wasn't reported here much in NATO nation media, what was the Kombolcha massacre in Amara in Ethiopia? What's your understanding of what happened in January? And any direct evidence of NATO nations actually aiding the TPLF in terms of armaments?
Well, son, you have 900 trucks of the WFP that just disappeared. Where did they disappear to? They're carrying food. Or so they said.
I should just say, Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. diplomat, said it was due to some very complicated issues, the theft of those aid trucks.
Please. Even the UN is not denying that they were taken by the TPLF, so I'm not sure why Feltman is trying to cover up for them. 900 trucks, food that's supposed to go to your people that you say are starving, that need help, that are in desperate need, disappear, and you see them being used by the TPLF in its rampage across Amhara regions and all the way down to Kombolcha. So are they helping them indirectly? Maybe they are. You know, I don't know that they told them to do what they did, but you cannot deny that they're helping them in some way.
How many died?
You see the guy actually make a statement and write an article in support of TPLF. This is a UN official. We officially complained while he was still here. He's retired now, Lowcock from OCHA. We complained about his Facebook page, his Twitter accounts, his writings about the TPLF, trying to tell him, you know, stay out of the internal affairs of Ethiopia. But did they give them moral support? Did they give them political support? Did they give them diplomatic support? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And that's not something that anybody's denying. And nobody's getting punished for that either.
Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
After the break. The reverberations from that port explosion continue. We go to the Paris of the Middle East to speak to Lebanon's former Foreign Minister Faraz Bouez as Iran and Hezbollah break the NATO nation-imposed economic siege. All this and more coming up in part 2 of Going Underground. Thanks for watching this Going Underground interview. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss an interview. Now it's your turn. Tell us what you think by commenting below and getting in touch via our social media. See you next time. All that is solid melts into air.